The Wes Penra Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Second Level of Learning. http://wespenry.com. Part 1, Metaphysics and Exopolitics. Metaphysics Paper Number 1, The Feminine Universe. By Wes Penra, Wednesday, May 2, 2012. Revised, Friday, July 13, 2012. http://wespenry.com. Part 1. The history of progress is written in the blood of men and women who have dared to espouse an unpopular cause, as, for instance, the black man's right to his body, or woman's right to her soul. Emma Goldman. When above the heavens had not been formed, when the earth below had no name, Tiamat brought forth them both. Tiamat, mother of the gods, creator of all. The Enuma Elish, earliest text, Tr. Mus Arnault. 1. Abstract, 2011 to 2012, 2 very challenging years. Since I wrote the first level of learning, the papers which preceded these, so much has happened. For you who are familiar with my work are also familiar with what the Pleiadians call the nanosecond def, which is the time they have assigned as the time between 1987 to 2012, in which time has sped up, going faster and faster for each year, reaching its peak in 2012, only to slowly decrease in speed after that. During this time period, our solar system is aligning with the galactic center, something that only happens approximately every 26,000 years. It signifies that the solar system has completed a full orbit around the zodiac. During the last 25 years, the gamma rays from the Sun, the central star, Alcyone, and the intense suns in the galactic center have affected mankind profoundly. Gamma rays carry lots of information, and over this 25 years time period, the human body has been able to accumulate this light energy and evolved exponentially, and of course, we still are. Everybody has been affected without exceptions, but not all people have been willing to process what they have learned on a sub-quantum level and have instead tried to hold on to old patterns, not appreciating the change that is occurring around and within us. 2012 is also, as most of us know, the end of a cycle in the Mayan calendar, and the start of a new. However, I can certainly testify to that my own life has changed profoundly during this exact time period of 1987 to 2012, and these last 2 years have been absolutely extraordinary. I feel I have developed enormously, and when I look back 3 to 4 years in time, it's like another lifetime. That's how much I feel I have changed and matured, spiritually and as a whole being. But the journey hasn't been without bumps in the road, either. When all these great energies from cosmos come in and hit us, we wake up and evolve, but we also all of a sudden are facing our demons and past life traumas. 2011 and 2012 have been very challenging for me personally, and I have had to handle a lot of things coming my way, seemingly out of the blue, but with a bigger perspective on things I realize that what has been happening was necessary for my own development, and it has made me stronger and helped me grow. All that is normal under the circumstances. Don't be alarmed if you get sick or face a lot of challenges now and the next few years to come, even if you think you are in control of your life right now. We all have things we need to confront and take responsibility for, old karma hitting us right on the nose. The information from the Sun and the galactic center is abundant and can have a profound effect on the nervous system. So if you get any kind of neurological problem now, it may pass when things are slowing down, at least in some people, if the increased energies is the reason for the illness. And if the doctors can't say what your illness is, I have faith that things will go back towards normal within a couple of years or so. The second level of learning, which you are reading right now, if you haven't read level I already, please do so first for best comprehension. Click here for the link, is a little different from level I. Although most of my information is backed up with sources, or showing some logic how I came to certain conclusions, there are also sources who need to be anonymous for any given reason, and we have to respect that. The logical mind always screams for sources and references, because it's very linear in its thinking and wants everything listed and explained to the smallest detail. This, however, is not how I work, in general. No one would expand their minds very much if everything was explained, and it turned out that when all readers had read these papers, they all thought the same way. That would, in my opinion, be a failure on my part. I'd rather see that the reader starts using his and her imagination and build their own universes off of what they read here. Imagination is the key and the road to freedom, and I'll explain why in paper number 3. I want people to expand their minds rather than putting them in a box. Thus, much of the material here can be challenging for the mind, but don't worry, that's how it should be. When you go away from the computer, or put the paper aside, if you print it out, it would be a good idea to ponder and expand on what you have read. Also, be very critical and don't take what I'm saying to heart without challenging it. It must make sense to you, the reader, or if it doesn't, it is not true for you. Another thing I need to bring up before we start is a minor change I've made since the first level of learning. Instead of putting definitions of words that the reader may find foreign via a link to the bottom of the page, I have now created a special definition page. So when you see this font style def after a word, you can click on it and it will take you to the definition page, which will list the words alphabetically, like in a dictionary. When you've read the definition, click the back button on your browser and it will take you back to the exact point where you stopped reading. In the original version of this paper of May 2, 2012, I promised the reader an Aryan dictionary as an appendix to the second level of learning. I regret to say that this is no longer a possibility in order for me to protect my sources. However, there are quite some clues to the old Aryan language in Robert Morningsky's Terra papers. http://www.bibliotekapieliads.net/vita_alien/esp_vita_alien_63.htm right parenthesis comma and in Anton Park's work, http://www.zeitlin.net/endenchantment/secrets.html right parenthesis. I apologize for the inconvenience, although I don't dismiss the possibility that I may be able to present one sometime in the future. When writing about subjects like these, we sometimes, as I said, have to rely on sources that for any given reason wish to be anonymous. Certain sources can't come into the open, or it could be right out dangerous for them, or it could even defeat the purpose with exposing their stories or their information. Hence, I am giving sources to my information wherever I possibly can, but some sources I will simply refer to as anonymous sources or reliable sources, and these are the sources that fall into the anonymous category. There is no use in coming to me afterwards and require to know who these sources are, because I cannot reveal them under any circumstances. So, with this short introduction I want to start sharing my most recent research with the reader, and I hope you'll enjoy and will find it helpful in your own development as a human being. 2. A fascinating story. When I was new to the internet back in the late 1990s and started researching different alien races, Robert Morningsky was a researcher I quickly took to heart after had read his Terra Papers 1. There he talks about the reptilian Aryan queens, who are supposedly one, if not the, oldest star race in this section of the universe. David Icke has dedicated much of his research to expose the reptilian races as well, as have many others. Robert Morningsky is a full-blooded native Indian, half Hopi and half Apache. He got his basic information from his Hopi grandfather, who told him about a star being, a star elder, as he called him, whom they had rescued from a UFO crash sometime in the late 1940s. In return from have been saved and cared for, this short, skinny being told them the history of the stars as it pertains to Earth, and the ancient story of planet Earth, which star beings normally call either Eridu, Terra, or Ura. It was a fascinating story about the Queen of the Stars from Orion who got in conflict with a younger star race from Sirius. This confrontation, after a lot of twists and turns, came to involve planet Earth in a very profound way and to such an extent that it directly has to do with the creation of mankind. Robert became so fascinated by this story that when he got older and started integrating himself with the civilized world, he spent much of his time researching what his grandfather had told him. He was stunned when he found out that what he'd been told as a child most likely was true. This inspired him so much that he wrote a research paper to give to his teachers. This, to his big surprise, at the time, was met with rejection, low grades, and he almost faced expulsion. Discouraged, he went back to his tribe and asked them if his grandfather had lied to him, but they explained that in the civilized world, they don't believe in such things as he's been told in the tribe. Nonetheless, the event with the Star Elder took place, they reassured him. So the young Robert continued his research, and in the 1990s he released the Terra Papers, which became a success. He then started traveling around the world, holding lectures and also teaching people in smaller groups as well as individually. However, Robert was heavily attacked, his office was broken into, research material was stolen, and his life threatened. He withdrew in 2002 from public appearances, not only due to the attacks, but also because further research had led him to believe that the Terra Papers were wrong. Not in essence, he said, but he got the locations and characters wrong, and he didn't go back far enough in time. However, with that statement, many people probably wrote him off at that time, and although his research was always in the back of my head, I went on looking into new things. Now Robert is back online again after many years, publishing very interesting material on his website http://robertmorningsky.com, and he also has a sister site at http://robertbearclaw.com. His material, building on his 15 years old Terra Papers, is now being released in increments. So why am I starting the second level of learning with this story? Well, it's because in his early material, Robert Morningsky claimed that the Queen of the Stars and her Orion Empire believe in the divine feminine. In other words, they were, and still are, absolutely certain that the universe is feminine in nature. Up until recently, I thought this was hogwash. How can the universe be feminine? Everybody knows that it's either masculine, or more likely, neuter. I knew certain sources claimed, independently from Morningsky, that God is feminine, but I hadn't looked further into this matter myself. I couldn't even picture this, because I didn't believe in God being a deity, i.e. a person. Little did I understand at the time that this is not what it's about. It was not until I started listening to certain interviews on YouTube with Robert, where he talks about the divine feminine, that my interest began to grow, and I decided to research this in more detail. I recently also reviewed the Terra Papers again, and I still find them being perhaps one of the most accurate compressed research I've encountered to this day about certain parts of the ET issue. I believe I can see what he means when he says he got certain parts wrong, but in spite of that, he is still quite accurate from my perspective. This will probably become clearer as we move on through the second level of learning, which I from here on will call Level 2. Since I listened to the Divine Feminine interview on YouTube with Robert Morningsky, I have learned that there is a lot of information which supports his research into ancient human history, and it's not hard to find, either. In this paper I will do my best to show the reader that what I thought was nonsense just a year ago, I now find overwhelming evidence for, and certainly not only from Robert Morningsky. 3. Is the universe feminine, created by a mother goddess? Let's start by looking at a few different sources to see what they have to say about the divine feminine. The first level of learning, from here on called Level IDEF, discussed the Anunnaki, who came down to earth and started the patriarchal regime, which culminated with the biblical patriarchs, but has followed us up to present time. Although we see more women in power today than we did a couple of hundred years ago and more, men are still the ones who rule this world, and the women in higher position are just working out of men's principles. On earth, men have filled the highest echelons of power for thousands of years. Women who reach top position are still subjected to a man-dominated worldview and are simply females executing male policies. At the same time, many people have wondered why this is. Me and my friends used to discuss this when I was a teenager. Of course, we had no clue at the time. We saw the feminist movement form and rise, but it was a Rockefeller-sponsored movement, instigated for many reasons, except for the right one. Women started reclaiming their rights in the late 1960s, early 1970s, just like the black people did with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, both assassinated, as their main spokesman, and the powers that be, PTB, DEF felt they had to do something about this upheaval, anticipating that this movement could possibly expand. So the Rockefellers and their fellow elite fellows wanted to firmly make a statement that nothing would be better if women were in charge. But more importantly, they steered the movement in a direction so that women became men. Many women in the movement even cut their hair to look like men, put on men's clothes, hid their femininity, and some of them started to despise, and even hate, men. I know this to be true firsthand, because I grew up with it. Some young men even became afraid of these women and lost their own masculinity, only too willing to please. There were those who were afraid that no women would like them if they didn't bow down to them. And what these women were misled to wish for was power, just like men had been misled to wish for power over many millennia. It was just the other end of an extreme. At the same time, women who still felt they wanted to remain feminine and keep female values were caught between and started feeling uncomfortable with being who they were, pressured by the women's liberation to change, even attacked for being just women. This movement did much more to enrich the patriarchal movement than to promote the divine feminine. The visible leaders of the feminist movement were all agents provocateurs, and more importantly, it was run by men. The movement, predictably enough, soon died out and the men in power could relax again. The Rockefellers and the patriarchal regime had proved that the world would not be a better place if women were in charge. We still need to ask ourselves, why is the power elite so afraid of women coming to real power? Why have women been so suppressed and abused over the millennia, more or less through the whole history of mankind? There must be something women have that men don't have, or have less of. But what is it? The secret to the struggle between the female and the male is an ancient conflict that goes back way before mankind was born. It has to do with the female sexual and spiritual powers of the gods. This power, as we shall see in later papers, were transferred down here to earth when Homo sapiens were created, hundreds of thousands of years ago. This is why the patriarchal regime has such a stronghold on earth and has had for such a long time. The divine feminine was suppressed by the gods. And from their standpoint, it was for a good reason. Before we were visited from a star race from Sirius some 450,000 to 500,000 years ago, other star races had already been here and were still here, teaching the beings living here then about the divine feminine. I will show, beyond reasonable doubt, how the patriarchal regime changed the world religion from one where mankind was in touch with a female divinity, mostly without worship involved, to several different religions where mankind worshipped masculine gods. Robert Morning Sky is calling what the women have an abundance of, fire. This fire is directly connected to the goddess universe, the feminine cosmos. It's not that males are not connected to the divine, we all are, but the females are directly connected with the prime energy of the universe and therefore came first and by default have more essence than males do. So already here we see that the Genesis story in the Bible is reversed. In the Bible it's said that male became before female, which I claim is wrong and has been changed by the Syrian patriarchal regime to support worshipping of a male god. The fire is another word for soul, our very essence, what LPGC Life Physics Group California calls information cloud, which is the divine energy surrounding the body and which contains our personality. Of course, both men and women have a soul, and we both have the fire, which is the powerful energy of the soul. However, according to my research, which is confirmed when looking into most ancient civilizations and tribes on Earth, the feminine aspect of the soul has more goddess power than the masculine because it came first. What the global elite and their extraterrestrial, masters are most afraid of is that people in general, and women in particular, are going to develop more of their feminine energies and become more powerful. Hence, the feminist movement in the 60s to 70s, where the feminine aspect of women were diminished, was instigated by the men of power, and both men and women lost their identities, and it was also a blow to the family unit, which they know is a strong bond between people. The power they are so afraid that we will develop also has a much deeper meaning, which will be discussed later. It is so secret that the PTB and the ETS who manipulate them would lose their control over us if we really knew and started using our powers. 4. Matriarchs versus patriarchs. As above, so below. The struggle between the feminine and the masculine is almost as old as the stars. Those who have studied Freemasonry, or read up on conspiracies know of the saying, as above, so below. This means that if it happens down here on Earth, it also happens in the heavens. This struggle is no exception. Galactic wars have been raging in one sector of the galaxy or another almost since the beginning of time. As long as there are opposites, men/women, black/white, good/evil and so on, star races in the universe who are evolving always seem to have something to fight over. And as long as there is separation, there will be concepts like mine and yours. This is particularly true when comes to galactic real estate, something I brought up in Level I as well. Beings out there in space are constantly fighting over planets, solar systems, and in some cases over whole galaxies, or groups of galaxies. It just goes on and is often a stage in a species development, and with time star races normally become more peaceful, but not always. However, beware of those who tell you on forum, websites, or elsewhere that the universe is an extremely violent and warlike place where star races are killing each other all the time. This is not true. In general, the multiverse is a place which supports love, compassion, and empathy as well as growth in consciousness and awareness. Therefore, the majority of the multiverse is a friendly place where certain laws and rules do apply. Still, species are always in different stages of development due to an almost infinite multiverse, so we can expect that there are races who fight over real estate instead of ethically and morally earn the real estate they want. A planet belongs to the star of that solar system, and the planet herself is a sentient being, and usually, the creator gods who seeded and developed a certain planet is its overseers until the evolution on the planet takes off on its own. Or, at least, that's how it's meant to be. A star system may be part of an empire, however, and that's when the fighting comes into place and different star races are trying to claim ownership to expand their own race and safeguard its survival. But besides fighting over real estate, there is also this ancient fight between the genders. This is not necessarily something that has to do with the development of a species, though not in the same manner as the fight over real estate. The disconnection between the genders, wherever this is a problem in this universe, can't be totally blamed on one gender or the other, it's a co-creation. The female carries the secret of life. She is the one who brings another person into being by uniting the sperm and the egg and from there create new life. This is something only females can do. However, the female energy exists in both males and females, and sexuality was originally meant to be something sacred. The mother goddess loves sex when there is a spiritual connection between two partners, because that's one major event when a real communication and connection between the goddess and her creations can take place. In the beginning of time, the genders came into competition with each other. Males got jealous of the feminine powers, especially the sexual powers the female possesses when she orgasms. The real purpose in the co-creation between the male and the female was forgotten as soon as jealousy came into the picture, and a misuse of sexual energy became the consequence of this competition. It eventually created matriarchal and patriarchal movements, where both were extremes on their ends, all in the apparent effort to appease the goddess and win her love. Albeit, the competition soon led to a worse distortion where the males wanted the female power in order to control both her and his environment. It became a rebellion against the mother goddess herself. The males started torturing, killing, and raping women in order to control them, but also to have them share their secret powers with them by force, something that they couldn't do, because they were not for men to experience and couldn't easily be explained. Females, in their turn, started using males as sex objects only, and it even went so far that females killed their lovers when they had fulfilled the sexual act. This was millions, perhaps billions of years ago, but is still an issue in some places in the universe, and certainly here on Earth. This age-long gender conflict is also described in details by Anton Parks in his epic about the history of the Geno Bull, the old reptilian races in his trilogy The Chronicles of Gurku, at this moment unfortunately only available in French. Park's interesting work is, however, translated in part from French to English by Malou and Gary Zeitlin on their fascinating website, http://www.zeitlin.net/endenchantment/secrets.html. But we're still in mystery over what this power that females have more of than men is, so let's see if we can elaborate on that, and why women have been so suppressed, both in galactic cultures, and here on Earth. According to the Aryan religion, the religion practiced in Orion, in other words, God is feminine in nature and is in fact the 96% dark energy/matter that human science can't explain, i.e. 96% of the universe, which is the blackness/darkness between stars and galaxies, by some called the void or the Khaa. Other names for it are Vril, Chi, Dur and Fahat. Around 75% of the universe is dark energy, and roughly 21% is dark matter. The remaining 4% of the universe that we can see, but still not fully explain, is that in which we live and can perceive with our five senses, also called the physical universe. LPGC in their working model, sea level I, call it the void, the nothingness outside the thought boundary of the unum. More on this in the two following papers. The Orions and most other evolved star beings in the universe know that because God is feminine, the female energy is more powerful than the male. Also, women are more psychic and can easier tune into the realm of the goddess, the 96%, which is pure spirit. And how do women do this most easily? The answer is, through ritual ecstasy, but more easily, through their orgasm. Those who have read up on my huge database, Illuminati News, http://illuminati-news.com, or studied similar information, know that women are almost always used in magic, whether it is old Enochian magic, or magic, K, with a K, which symbolizes the 20th century magician Aleister Crowley's work and all that which branches out from it. Crowley put a K at the end to distinguish it from stage magic that illusionists practice, so for the sake of simplicity, I will do the same thing from here on. On the higher levels of any secret society on Earth that's worth its name, sex magic is a big part of it. And in the many cults of the global elite, a mother goddess is often in the center of them, but still controlled by males, often via sophisticated mind control. Sex magic has by many who don't understand the subject been deemed black magic and called Satanism, not only by Christians, but other religious groups as well. Anyone involved in darkness and dark rituals have been shunned and called Satan worshippers. This is not entirely true. In the beginning, sex magic was the ritual men and women used when they still knew about the divine feminine, they were followers of the Aryan religion. The darkness everybody is talking about was their attempts to connect with the 96% spirit, so-called dark matter and dark energy. There was nothing satanic in these rituals, they were practiced the way they were meant to by two human beings who loved each other and could accumulate power via the female orgasm. At the moment of orgasm, the woman became like a supercharged rod which entered the realm of the goddess, which the Orions call the Khaa, and she could bring divine energy back into the third dimension and accumulate it in her body and soul. Then she could use that power for the good of herself, her family, her tribe, or anything she wanted. This is the route to shamanism, where they knew how to use the female power for the good of things. The female orgasm is but one of more ways for a female being to reach beyond the stars. Again, shamanism, which is an old Aryan religion, I've learned, is the answer. Still today we can see shamans dance for hours and sometimes days until they reach a trance-like stage where they can walk on fire without being burned. They have been seen shape-shifting into bears and other creatures, but most importantly, they open up portals to the Khaa, the goddess universe. Before the patriarchs came down on Earth from the stars, there was an androgynous human race, who were the guardians of this planet, and in direct communication with the goddess universe. They had the capacity to easily connect to the depth of the goddess universe just by their thoughts. They were highly multidimensional beings, very friendly, compassionate, humble, and spiritually powerful. Then, when the patriarchs came down to earth from the stars, they stood face to face with this androgynous race and saw the wonders they could do. The intruding star race did all they could to steal this goddess power, but this early human race refused to give it away or tell the intruders how to get access to it, because they could see that these people were not of the light. So the patriarchs changed things around. They got jealous of the powers of this androgynous race, because they could do what the patriarchs could not, and that annoyed them. After all, they were the Syrian lords, the Kaunas kings, and the A.am.I, the proud warrior race from the stars. Some have called them the Anunnaki. To make a long story short, and I will tell the long story later, they created Homo sapiens to become their slave race and got the idea to make them sexual, in the image of themselves. So they mixed their own DNA with that of the androgynous species and apes that were already inhabitants on the planet, creating this new, hybrid race, hoping they would have the same powers as the androgynous species, however, this time mostly through sexuality. This new hybrid race was Homo sapiens, the thinking man. As we shall see throughout these papers, the Syrian lords succeeded beyond their own imagination. Homo sapiens, this highly sexual race, could do the same things as the androgynous race before them, not only through sacred rituals of ecstasy, but also through the female orgasm. Our creators managed to create a species which they themselves did not fully understand, and still don't up to this day, and the female power they were hoping to use for their own benefit became the secret of Homo sapiens. It became so sophisticated that the Syrians, to their own frustration, couldn't learn how to tame this power and use it for themselves. They are still learning. After Homo sapiens had been created, they were pretty much in the hands of the Syrian lords. They were owned by their creators. Although the lords were patriarchal and in rebellion against the goddess, they let the early humans know that the goddess is the creator of the universe and that she needs to be worshipped through rituals and sacred sex. In the beginning, only certain hand-picked humans were allowed to have sacred sex with Syrian men present, trying to steal the power of the female orgasm when it happened between two humans of opposite sex. Others, like the famous Enki, or Ea, suggested against his half-brother Namur's the Enlil decision and let humans have unlimited sex, but still under supervision and in honor of the goddess, in order to make the rituals more powerful, not because he was matriarchal. Shamanism was always led by the feminine force. Only women could be shamans in the old days, because they are the only ones who can truly not only connect to the Khaa, but also bring back the essence of the goddess. This Khaa can, in the 4% universe, after it's been accumulated, be transformed into very powerful, raw energy of the same kind the goddess used when she creates universes. Nothing else can be compared to it. After the patriarchs had accepted Ea's way of doing things in regards to controlling human sexuality, the Syrians started infiltrating shamanism and replaced the female shaman with a male, and from there on the purpose of, and the original results from shamanism have disappeared from our Western societies and most of the rest of the world. Although male shamans can open up portals as well, they can't accumulate the Khaa and reuse it in the sense a trained female shaman can. All that which women stand for is what the males of certain alien races have been after for so long. This is why we see women being sexually abused and mind-controlled in satanic rituals, and why there is so much pedophilia in high places of society, something that is getting revealed more and more in mainstream media as I write this. In Orion, for example, the female is born to be in the center, and the males are there to protect and support her. It's deeply rooted into their culture. Albeit, this is not merely an Orion trait, it has become my understanding that this is very common in the universe, at least in cultures who have genders. Not all extraterrestrial cultures do. The Syrians tried everything from torture, rape, pedophilia to inserting their own souls into female bodies, but nothing worked as well as it did for the humans. The Syrians could gain some of the power from the rituals or from human sex, but they couldn't accumulate much of it, or sustain it over longer periods of times, and they did not gain the power that they wanted so they could conquer the universe and defeat their enemies. Because conquerors they were, and conquerors they still are. In fact, their true goal is more sinister than just conquering some other star systems. something which will be revealed throughout these papers. What probably surprised the alien lords the most was that even when they inserted their own soul into a female human, they could not achieve the same thing the human soul could. The reason for this was what the androgynous race had realized the hard way: the Syrians were not of the light, and therefore they could not connect to the depth of the Khaa like humans are able to. With time, when the patriarchal regime understood that if they let the women lead the way to the Khaa and be in charge, they would become too powerful and could threaten the Syrian lords themselves. So they simply turned things around and recreated the strict male society they had implemented on their home worlds, and honoring the goddess became outlawed. The creator of all things now became a male deity, which should be worshipped instead. Sometimes people got to worship several gods, but the main gods were always male and presented as very powerful and in charge of the same thing. The goddess is in charge of the Khaa, the creative forces of the goddess universe. Thus, when everything had failed, and the Syrians could not figure out how to tame the raw female energy, even through torture and sexual abuse, they thought that if these same females were to believe that they, the mighty Syrian lords, were indeed gods, or if they turned all these Syrian deities into one god for humans to worship, the Syrians themselves would be the target for the female rituals and their sexual energy, and that must be the best way for them to accumulate it like the females can. Another thing they did was to instigate more and more sinister rituals, where mind-controlled and traumatized women, called high priestesses, were placed in the center of attention. These women were then raped and tortured, and many of them were sacrifices in bloody rituals, often in the moment of orgasm. In addition to accumulating as much female power as possible through sexual ecstasy, they also drank the blood from the dying female to enhance the effect. Because in the blood runs the spirit of the divine feminine, the mother goddess. Blood is very powerful. We have been living under a patriarchal regime ever since, and these horrific rituals have continued, and are practiced in high places behind secret doors up to present time. However, when the patriarchal lords changed things around and created this male-dominated world, there were still tribes hidden from the impostors, tribes who managed to keep the ways of female shamanism relatively intact and continued honoring the mother goddess in order to solve problems within the tribe, such as stopping drafts by evoking rain, curing the sick, helping the dying to pass over, using Khaa to bring about a good hunt, etc. This is what shamanism here on earth was all about in the beginning, practiced by tribes, hidden from the men of power, in order to be able to practice their religion, the religion of the mother goddess, or the divine feminine. The female doesn't necessarily have to have orgasm to achieve these divine powers, it can be done through shamanic dancing, but an easier way to accomplish the same goal is through her sexuality. However, today's women have forgotten where their powers lie, and they are as much slaves to the patriarchal regime as men are, just even more suppressed. The more supernatural powers a being has, the more she or he has to be suppressed by the regime that be.